pure awareness, in your pure awareness, conceptually, of course, you don't know anything. When your mind stops, for example, now, if I stop speaking now, and you're still here too, we can do it together. I stop speaking for a few seconds, and as I stop speaking, do you need to fill that space between me stopping to speak and starting to speak again? Do you need to fill that space with thought, or are you able to simply be present in that space? In other words, are you able to just simply be? Don't suppress thought. That doesn't work. You can't hold your breath and say, I must not think. That might work, but then thinking will come up even more strongly once you start breathing again. So it's not that. You can't hold down thought. It's a pure shift into a more alert state of consciousness. Alert. Alert means, okay, now acting out alertness. Now, I'm not just acting it out. When I look at you in this weird way, I'm not thinking. And when you look at me, looking at you in this weird way, you also could experiment with that and see whether, as I stop speaking now for 10 seconds, you can just be in that space of pure awareness where you take in sense perceptions against the background of awareness. And you might notice that in that space, you don't know anything. You don't even know your name, because your name is a thought. You don't know anything in that space. And yet, you are there, conscious, present, without any movement in the mind. That's presence. That was Socrates' state when he said, I know that I don't know anything, because in that state you know that you don't know anything, and there are no words in it. Now don't confuse that, which is a state of rising above thinking. Don't confuse that with falling below thinking, which can be nice too. If you are tortured on a daily and nightly basis by your mind, to fall below thinking can be a relief. But that's not why we're here. Otherwise, I would be offering you all kinds of substances to help you fall below thinking. You can drink and smoke and go, feels so good. Don't have to think anymore. Oh, a bit more of that and a bit more of that. So that's where eventually that takes you. That's a relief. You can experience the same relief when you get tired at night. There's a moment when you're still conscious, but when you're too tired to think about your problems. So you're not being tortured by your mind, as it usually tortures you for most of the day. You're not tortured by your mind, and the approach of sleep feels delicious. and you are not thinking. Oh, I wish I could stay here is the last thought that you have. And then you go off. And then you wake up in the morning and your eyes open. And for a few seconds, you go 10 seconds maybe, 20. And then the machinery of the mind starts creaking. What time is it? What's my first appointment today? Oh, no, I have to deal with that. Oh, God. And then I have to meet that obnoxious person at 11. And there you are, gone. There was a moment of presence. And perhaps in that moment, when you woke up, you had risen above thought. When you went to sleep, you were falling below thought. When you woke up, perhaps for 10 seconds, you were on a level above thought. And that is a level where you look at the world with that bright eyes and pure innocent perception. And everything is alive. You can sense the aliveness in everything. And the world is good at this moment. And you have no problems. And then that's present moment. Awareness is present moment awareness. It's always implied. When we use the term awareness, present moment is implied because you can only be aware in the present moment. Awareness is presence. And then you lose the present moment. You lose awareness because your consciousness is being absorbed by thinking. It sucks up all your consciousness like some parasitical parasite, psychic parasite living inside you that sucks up all. I need more. I need to think more. And then you have this monstrous thing in your head, and you think it's you. And it talks all the time. Not necessarily out loud, it talks in here. And you can have discussions in here too. And you're identified with it. The unconscious state, lack of awareness, complete absence. You are not there. So the revolutionary, incredible thing that is the essence of the new consciousness that arises, a new evolutionary stage for humanity, which either is already, we are on the way towards it, even if, just to come back to what I said earlier, I might have lost the thread, even if we have to go through another episode of intense self-created suffering on a huge scale, which is not impossible. Even if humanity has to go through that, the awakening consciousness is not lost. It will then, when humanity regenerates, it will quickly arise again, the same consciousness that's arising in you now, and bring about the collective awakening, which are we going to experience another dark age? Maybe. But what's 1,000 years? Not much. Even 2,000 years, not that much. So I'm very optimistic. Consciousness will prevail because consciousness is the purpose of the universe. The universe there's an impulse, an evolutionary impulse towards consciousness in the universe. So all is well. And now it's up to you. Now we come to what really matters, to change the world. We've already seen it cannot be done unless there is that shift in consciousness in the individual human. And that begins with you, and it takes place every moment of your life. And you use every opportunity and whatever arises in your life as part of that. And sometimes you forget, that's fine. Sometimes you get taken over again by the mind completely. The ego arises again, that's fine. And then you wake up again. So for many of you, it's you wake up and you fall to sleep periodically. It's the new, you're present, and then the old, you're absent. And then you wake up again. And that's fine. That's part of for most people, that is part of the awakening process. And gradually, the periods of time when you're awake, present, lengthens. You're awake for longer than before. And the ability of challenges and other unconscious humans to pull you into unconsciousness decreases. A positive thought is much less likely to become obsessive, that you can't get rid of, than a negative thought. Well, the first thing I think that anybody would probably say, it's more pleasant to have nice thoughts than negative thoughts. It feels better, certainly. The body likes it more too, because negative thoughts, negative thoughts influence the body in some way, obstructing the energy flow. You can test it out for yourself when you feel stressed or got into repetitive negative thoughts, then your body doesn't like it. It reacts. Even mainstream medicine is discovering there is a link between, well, some still say no, but there is a link between your predominant state of mind or consciousness and the physical functioning. Not that now you may also find that negative thoughts proliferate and multiply much more readily than positive thoughts. A negative thought wants to proliferate, and it wants to produce more negative thoughts. And then you may find a positive thought is quite happy to stand alone. There isn't the pull towards proliferation of more of itself. A positive thought is much less likely to become obsessive, that you can't get rid of, than a negative thought. So when you are trapped in the mind, it's very rare, if ever happens, that you are trapped in obsessive good thoughts. You are usually trapped in obsessive negative thoughts. Because that is what negative thoughts love to do. They love to take you over. They want to, for some reason, they're like certain insects that suddenly reproduce and become from one. They give birth to 50, and the 50 give birth to another 50, and suddenly you have millions and billions of them. And So the difference, a fundamental difference then is a negative thought is actually, first of all, makes you feel better, is easier to experience that which follows the thought, because often after negative thought you just experience the reality of what the thought just pointed to. Life is beautiful, the person here mentions as an example of a positive thought. Life is beautiful. What's wrong with that thought? Because after that thought, you're actually going to have a certain experience of life being beautiful. So the thought was no more than a pointer, a signpost. And that's perfectly fine. You use thought as a pointer. It does not absorb all your attention as a thought. It's quite happy to be just a pointer. Life is beautiful, and then perhaps for the next few minutes, you appreciate everything that is around you, and it becomes a true experience. So as a pointer, it can work beautifully. And the negative one is just one and after another, it becomes obsessive. So, but even if you change all your thinking from negative to positive, the most vital thing is to realize that which is beyond all thought. Positive thought in itself is not yet liberating. It doesn't liberate you. Can be nice, but it doesn't liberate you. Only to find the place that is beyond all thought liberates you. Now, does that free you from negative thoughts? Yes, after a while, the negative thoughts need your identification, which means your unconsciousness, in order to proliferate continuously in your life. It's only if you identify with them, you give them your total attention. In fact, it's not only that, you become them. They come out of your mouth when you speak. They're in your thoughts. They take you over. They possess you. You become them. And that's how they continue to grow and take over your life. And it can happen. Some thoughts or thought patterns have the same function in the human mind in many cases as a virus has in the body. A virus can proliferate and takes over the body, and so there are many mental viruses that people get taken over by and can't get rid of. Sometimes you have that virus the whole lifetime. Persistent, deep-seated negative thoughts that occupy either your entire mind or a particular section of your mind. And sometimes the virus that can take over collectively an entire collective entity of human beings, be it a nation or a tribe or a religion or a section within a religion. It can be a political movement that suddenly has all the answers and knows where the enemies are. It happened when National Socialism in Germany was an infection of a collective mental virus. Soviet communism, which started, of course, with good intentions, but of course there had been absolutely no change in consciousness, so good intentions are not enough unless there's a shift in consciousness. Good intentions will lead you to more suffering if there's no shift in consciousness. So Soviet communism became an awful thing, and it took over as, again, a collective mental virus. China under Mao Zedong, a collective mental virus. Millions and millions died in China, in Soviet communism, obviously Nazi Germany. Millions and millions. Under Mao Zedong, children would denounce their parents. If a child was unhappy with their parents, they would go to somebody at school and say, my parents are saying this and that. The next day they would be taken away to a labor camp and never be seen again. Total insanity. So a collective, flowers were declared illegal. They had to tear out all the flowers. Bourgeois infection, we don't want flowers. And many, just countless things being taken over by an entire nation being taken over by a mental obsessed with certain mind forms. And then it passes. It doesn't, it can last a couple of decades. In Soviet communism lasted fairly long. National Socialism, the 1,000-year Reich, lasted, don't know, 15 years or something. So it runs its course, and then like a virus infection, after a while, the virus disappears, and a semblance of sanity returns. Certainly sanity compared to what was there before. There's still the normal insanity that's part of the normal state of consciousness, but not the extreme unconsciousness that can take over when a thought form becomes a virus. And of course it happens to individuals. They interpret the world through their mental virus. You might have certain ideas. If you go on the internet too much, and you might see things that suddenly put the virus infection can happen by looking up certain things on the internet, and you suddenly believe totally in what this. It could be a total fantasy, but it looks so convincing that it becomes a thought form in your mind, and then from there it grows, and after that you only have contact with those people who are also infected by that thought form, and you think that becomes then your reality. That is the case with many conspiracy theories. Now, I'm not saying that 1 out of 10, 20, or 50 conspiracy theories may not be correct. It could well be. But many of them are fictitious constructs. But of course, the world is pretty insane, so it's probably more insane than you realize, and that includes particularly politicians and political power play and so on. So I'm not denying that absolutely there is no conspiracy. There are quite mad things happening that we don't know about, and yet I wouldn't go that way. Even if it's true, don't get drawn into that. Your job is to be present. Your job is to embody a different state of consciousness. You cannot fight unconsciousness on its own level. You have to rise above unconsciousness. So good thoughts, yes, good thoughts are preferable to bad thoughts, but then go beyond thought also. Then negative thoughts will lessen in your life, even if you've been around for a long time, as more presence arises. Good thoughts can arise naturally, and a lot of your consciousness is no longer dependent on what thoughts you have. There's just more presence. And you appreciate life through presence rather than trying to convince yourself that you should appreciate life. You appreciate life directly. Gratefulness is another important thing. Gratitude is, of course, wonderful, very transformative. Gratitude implies a deep appreciation of what you are perceiving around you. Whether or not you have the thought in your mind that accompanies that says, thank you, it's secondary. And after a while, you don't need thank you anymore. But when you first practice gratitude, thankful can be helpful. When you say something beautiful, thank you for things that otherwise you wouldn't even acknowledge. Thank you for how the light reflects off this table. Thank you for this shiny clock. I know it's not real gold, but it shines beautifully. Thank you for this amazing substance that we call water. Got these little, tiny bubbles in it. And here it is. I can look at it, drink it, it's alive. It's an amazing thing. And you can appreciate it. It's filled with light, life-giving substance. Why not appreciate it? And whether or not you say thank you, it's up to you. Thank you is not the main. The main thing is the act of giving it attention. That again is perceiving it through presence. And then everything is something to be valued that's around you. So that's wonderful spiritual practice, and of course for a while it's a spiritual practice. Then it becomes second nature. That's how you live. So there is some association with certain thoughts, yes, expressing gratitude, but it's not the main thing. The thoughts are more like pointers towards that which is beyond thought. But in many people's lives, the beginning of spiritual practice and realization is that they suddenly realize how much they've been trapped in negative thinking over past years. And they suddenly wake up to their own thought processes, whereas before they were trapped in their own thought processes. That's the beginning of spiritual awakening. If you realize what kind of thought processes have been predominant in your life over the past few years, on every day, through which you interpret other people, the world, yourself, your life, and so on. And that's an amazing jump, because it implies suddenly awareness or presence has emerged. But there is a source of power in you that transcends the person. And it's not egoic power over somebody. And it's one with a power that is the power of life in the universe, where all life arises. And people sometimes have a problem with self-confidence or valuing yourself, and sometimes you try to convince yourself by changing your thinking that you are actually good enough, that you should be self-confident. But there is a better way to find the source of self-confidence. On the egoic level, self-confidence is there because you see, you can tell yourself, I'm actually more intelligent than most of these people, or I'm better looking than most. I have to remind myself that I'm better looking than most, and then I feel a bit more confident now. Or you say, I actually have more money than these people, so I have more self-confidence. Whatever it is, some way of convincing yourself, and then you compare yourself with others, and then you focus on those areas where you feel superior to others, and try not to think about other areas where inevitably you are inferior to others, because you cannot be superior in all areas. It's a complicated game when you start comparing yourself to other people. And if you want to bolster your self-confidence, and you only have to focus on where you feel I'm actually better than most. But that doesn't really work that well. So there is a better way of self-confidence that has nothing to do with comparing yourself with others, or with feeling you're better than or not as good as. And that is direct access to inner power. You don't need any comparison. You can have it right now at this very moment, if you're not stuck in your thinking mind, but take your attention a little bit beyond the thinking mind and then realize that you are the presence behind the thinking mind, without which there could be no thinking. You're the aware presence behind it all. That is deeper, you've gone deeper than the thinking mind. And that aware presence is where power resides. And it's not yours, because it connects you with universal power. Therefore, you don't need to compare yourself to anybody anymore, or feel, as the ego always does, that you are either superior or inferior to somebody else. That's not a comfortable way to live, where you have to classify yourself when you meet people. And so you have the fears always, I might be inferior. Or behind that fear is a desire to be superior. Here's my wife. And she's better looking than yours. Now you begin to lose the present moment internally when the place you want to get to, whatever that may be, whether it's tomorrow or in 5 years' time, or even 5 minutes from now, you lose the present moment and your state of mind becomes somewhat or very dysfunctional when whatever goal you have or destination you have in the future occupies more of your attention than the present moment. So the place you want to get to or achieve, one day when I'll become a great this or that, perhaps you have a great idea of, maybe let's say you want to become a rock star. I want to be a rock star. Okay, well hopefully you enjoy music and have not just a mental image of who you want to be as somebody important, but you don't enjoy the several years that you need to get there. If you don't enjoy the journey, which is always now, the step you're taking at this moment, if there's a lack of enjoyment, then you have lost the present moment, and the place you want to get to has assumed an importance that is becomes dysfunctional. So this is already mentioned in ancient scriptures as a teaching. For example, in the ancient Bhagavad Gita, the wonderful, if you haven't read it yet, wonderful ancient Indian scripture, it talks of not being too attached to what it calls the fruit of your action, which is the outcome, which is you project yourself. One day I'm going to be happy. That's the fruit. One day when people realize that I'm a fantastic human being, and I get all the recognition from people, then I'll be fine. When I have those possessions that I need, I won't be happy until I have a private jet. Doesn't have to be big, just a little one. I won't be happy until then I feel I'm fully myself. I cannot be fully myself unless I have a car that's better than most people's cars. And so you strive towards that, and in the meantime, you're not happy because you're striving towards a place that promises some form of fulfillment, whether you call it happiness or having arrived, or this weird expression in the English language, making it. Making what? I want to make it. And then you have weird ideas in your mind. An enormous amount of fear arises because you have certain thoughts, especially at 3 o'clock in the morning. You wake up and the mind starts up and a weird word comes. I don't want to be a loser. A loser. Oh my God. And fear is, maybe I will be a loser. Maybe I'm not going to get this car. And maybe I'm not going to become the greatest this or that. Or maybe I'm not going to find the person who's going to make me happy. Well, you won't. There is no human being on the planet that can make you happy unless you find the source of happiness within yourself, in which case you'll be quite happy with somebody. It's likely, but that person will not cause you the happiness, except while you are going through the honeymoon period. And that is human beings. You look to human beings. Some future. I need to meet my soulmate. I need to meet or whatever it is. Or maybe it's a trophy wife. You can show off. Here's my wife, and she's better looking than yours. Because she wouldn't be with a loser, would she? And then, of course, after a little while, the trophy wife won't satisfy you, and then you have to look somewhere else. In fact, she might make you unhappy, or you make her unhappy. You make each other unhappy. So this is very common. Many of you may have experienced as far as looking to a human being to make you happy. You may already have experienced that didn't work. Because the very human being that you chose to make you happy, only 2 or 3 years later, or 4, 5, made you unhappy. The very same person whose purpose it was to make you happy, and you signed a contract, so it was all fine. The contract was signed, and then something happened that wasn't supposed to happen. The person who's supposed to make you happy suddenly starts making you unhappy. And you may not realize that you are making him or her unhappy too. Self-knowledge is more difficult than knowing somebody else. So always looking to some future moment, and then you realize on a practical level, future works. But on a deeper level, finding a true satisfaction in life, you have to look somewhere else. All these things are good. Achieving things is good. Even relationships are, of course, if they're conscious, then all the better. I'm not saying stop looking for somebody to marry, that's fine, but don't look for somebody to make you happy. They're always, I don't look at these things anymore, but in the past when people put ads, I sometimes enjoyed reading ads, and when they had newspaper ads for finding relationships or marriage ads, and it was always amusing what people were looking for. Nowadays, of course, it's all on your phone. It's called Tinder. And the hand movement associated with it, apparently, I've never actually looked at Tinder, but I know that the hand movement associated with it goes like this. And each wife represents a human being. Well, that's weird, very weird. So when I enjoyed reading the newspaper ads, and sometimes it said, looking for woman or man to make me happy. Oh dear, I thought. So the future then, what is the future that never appears, that can completely occupy our attention to such an extent that we lose actually the most important thing in life, and that is to be at home with yourself in the present moment, to feel where you are, to feel a kind of, this may sound a little strange, to feel a connectedness with being. The connectedness with being, so that you're rooted in something deep, abiding. There's a deep peace, not a dead kind of peace, but an alive peace. To be rooted within yourself, to be yourself, here and now, in this moment. Losing that, or never discovering it, never realizing even the possibility of this existing in your life, then if you don't find the true meaning of present moment, of the now, which is very deep, as we will see, it's very deep, then you live flitting around the surface of life. There's always some future moment to either be afraid of or be attracted to. The future is a two-edged sword, as you might discover when you're starting to think and worry, and there's the hope that the future is going to make me happy in some way through a human being, some attainment, a possession, some recognition, whatever it may be. Or security, ultimate security. One day, I just want to feel secure. I want to feel secure. And they might even sell you life insurance and say you'll feel really secure. You just buy this, and you have a pension plan, and then I'll be okay. You just need a good pension plan. And then it feels... life insurance, of course, means you have to die first before anything... So it should be called death insurance. So security, I'm looking for some sense of security, and you look some security in external conditions. I want to have a place. Yes, it's a very human thing, but you may need to live for a while to realize no matter what situation you go into, no matter who you are with, and no matter what you achieve in life, always this sense of insecurity, of fear, of insufficiency, of some underlying sense of lack or something not quite right, always it resurfaces sooner or later, and usually sooner. And so if you thought, let's say you achieve everything that commonly in our civilization, the media and so on, or the magazines or internet, whatever, tell you that the highest you can achieve is wealth and fame. And then you think, oh, if I only had all that, then I would be a happy human being, I would have security. And of course, many human beings who have achieved it, I've met quite a few, that was quite interesting, who in the eyes of the world had everything and they were unhappy. In fact, some of them were more unhappy when they got everything than before, when they still were striving to achieve those things. They were more unhappy because now, when you have already tasted everything, you no longer have some ideas as, once I achieve that, I'll be happy. Well, you have everything. What can you achieve now? Okay, well, you could think enlightenment. I've got the private jet, I've got all the money that I can do anything, but I'm still unhappy. Okay, if the unhappiness that arises there, if that brings you to the possibility of awakening, then that's a good thing. Now, the thing we need to recognize is no matter what you achieve, there's nothing wrong with achievement. But ultimately, that is not which is going to give you this sense of self that you are looking for, that sense of being rooted, that sense of security. Everything in this world is insecure, ultimately. No matter how secure your job may be, whatever, there's the radical insecurity and uncertainty. Nobody knows what the next moment will bring because it can only appear as this moment. What is the future then that everybody looks to? It's always associated with a thinking, it's a thought. On a deeper level, future is a thought in your head, and you only experience it ever as a thought in your head. That's the only reality future has. Isn't that interesting? It has no actual, immediate existential reality except as a thought that you're thinking about some future moment. But even while you're thinking that thought, it's still the present moment and you don't even know it. Because nothing can happen that's not in the present moment. And then there's the past. When you think about the past, again, where is the past? It's in your head. It's a thought in your head, or a sequence of thought in your head. So future and past are associated, intrinsically linked with the activity of thinking. When you think you have a choice, and suddenly you become present, that means presence has chosen to come through you. So I sometimes say that you can choose, once a certain level of presence is in you, you can choose to be present. Like now, I can choose to go into my mind and start thinking about my life. Where am I coming from? Where am I going? Or I can choose to be reactive when things happen. Well, it looks as if I didn't have a choice, but many people still don't have a choice. The reaction comes. They're taken over by the reaction. But when there's a certain degree of presence in you, you have a choice. You might forget that you have a choice, but you have a choice. This is how it looks like, looked at it from the outside, that you have a choice. It's true. But if you look at it from the inside, when you think you have a choice to be present, presence is choosing to come through you. When you think you have a choice and suddenly you become present, that means presence has chosen to come through you. Nevertheless, it is helpful to feel that you have a choice from this perspective, the outside perspective. That's what presence wants you to feel, that you have a choice. Ultimately, you are present, you are the one consciousness. So, it's not that you don't choose presence, it's just a helpful perspective, a temporary perspective. So, when you are dealing with a difficult person, or an unconscious person, which is the same thing, an obnoxious person, unconscious person, angry person, unconscious person, then you have a choice. You can be drawn into their unconsciousness, can easily slip. Any one person, one angry or upset or deeply negative unconscious person can pull an entire room full of people, like let's say there's a committee meeting of 20 people, and one of those 20 people is and attacks others. This one person can pull almost virtually everybody into his or her deeply unconscious negative state. This is how contagious a negative state can be. One very unconscious person in a room can do that. You could almost also say that sometimes a few very unconscious people, and this happened before, can create an entire war if because they draw others in. This could, perhaps that was how the First World War started. Nobody exactly knows what were they all fighting about. It started with one person killing somebody in what later became Yugoslavia. But I don't know the details, it's too much, don't want to go into that. One so-called terrorist or whatever killed somebody, and that became the First World War. So millions and millions killed in a room. The same thing, one unconscious person can pull everybody into, and before you know it, they're all fighting and shouting at each other. So there is the danger there, because you need to know that, but if you remember that there you have a choice at that moment to be drawn into that or to be there as an aware presence, then you can be continue to be there as an aware presence, and then that could make all the difference to the energy field in the room. It could dissolve the unconsciousness of that one deeply unconscious person. Just one person who remains present. And sometimes it's very helpful. You can have a group of people discussing things, an organization, whatever they're doing, and one person there who can be, as we could call it, an anchor for presence, can help the entire group to remain relatively present while they are discussing whatever it is that they need to discuss. That is a wonderful thing when you realize that possibility. Or if you are in a group of people and you are there as a non-reactive presence, and if the others in that group are so deeply unconscious that they go on and go off into violent conflict, mentally, emotionally violent, might even come to blows. Often you see in certain countries in parliaments, they discuss something and then suddenly they jump up and start hitting each other. And some countries they don't quite hit each other, but they get close. There's a lot of shouting. Can be quite amusing, but so if you often one person can make a lot of difference, so-called person, it's not the person. And if you don't affect the energy field, then very quickly you will not remain where you are. If your state of consciousness is completely incompatible with your surroundings are so deeply unconscious that there's no way it could affect those, then a separation will happen, like oil and water. You will find yourself being removed from there. That just happens. It can happen with yourself waking up one morning and saying, okay, I'm not going in, and this is it. Or find yourself walking out, goodbye. Or they call you and say, we don't need you, I'm afraid we'll have to let you go. You're too conscious for this organization. You don't fit in at all anymore. I don't know what happened to you. You're disrupting everything here. Although this is not a retreat as such, I suggest that you use your time here, make it into a kind of a retreat, and all that it means is your main interest is in consciousness while you are walking in this lovely small town, looking at things, talking to people. Be the presence rather than the person that needs to interpret everything. Be the presence behind the awareness. Be the awareness behind the sense perceptions. Like now. You cannot improve this moment by adding unnecessary thought to it. What thought would you want to add to this moment? It just detracts from the aliveness and beauty of this moment. The mind, of course, can't sense that, and it'll say, what do you mean? What's beautiful about this moment? Well, everything. The stillness in this room, the spaciousness, the lights, the beings, your being. And the consciousness that you are, without which none of this could be, sensing yourself as the conscious presence. That's the ocean. Yes, you're also a person with a body and a personalized sense of self, that's the ripple. So you go from being a ripple to being ocean, and then you can be both. So that you no longer have, you can be either meditating and very aware, and usually the people go then, I'm practicing mindfulness. Or they go about their daily life. I've done mindfulness for 20 minutes. What do I have to do now? Oh my gosh, can't deal with this. The emails, I haven't answered all these emails. Can you? Okay. And then 8 hours later, time for more mindfulness. It's better than no mindfulness, of course. At least you have it there. If you have it, maybe you're just trying. But bring it into every moment, so that you have whatever it is you're doing, and always a sense of yourself as the presence. And this is wonderful when you can feel your presence. It's not yours, but I call it yours. Because the moment I say your presence, I've created a duality. There's you and there's the presence. But there is no duality there. You are the presence. Language creates duality. So that's fine. So feel the presence. Right now, you are both a person, but to be a person, you need to remember who you are. Of course, you need to think about me and my life. Then you're a person. Or at this very moment, you can also be the presence. When there's little or no conceptualization in your mind, but just an arising of what before was the background comes into the foreground. And then you start thinking without losing a sense of presence in the background. Then thinking is actually not bad at all. It's only when thinking becomes self-serving and you lose yourself in it, then it gets very problematic. It creates one problem after another, pretending, wanting to solve problems. That's self-serving thinking. So let's practice now here, being the presence, no thought, and sensing how liberating that is, not needing to know anything beyond that. No conceptual knowledge required for that at all. And if some concept is needed, somebody approaches you, you're just looking around, somebody comes and says, "Oh, can you tell me how to get to such and such a street?" Then the mind starts, and it's fine.
To be enlightened, how does it feel like?
Feels good.
I mean, I need to know what I'm doing, so I think I have to go through the mental process of understanding this, and what will I get out of this?
The motivation to seek enlightenment or can be of various kinds. Some work better than others. There's a danger that the search for enlightenment is ego-motivated. That can easily happen. The ego feels a sense, which is quite normal, of lack or dissatisfaction with the things either the things it has or the things it has already achieved and didn't fulfill it, and then it went on to something else, and that wasn't quite that fulfilling either. And then it reads or hears something about the possibility of achieving a state of enlightenment. well, that sounds much better than all the things I've been looking for so far, because those things haven't satisfied me, so I'm going to go for that. And then the ego creates, of course, a goal. I want to reach that goal. In the same way that before it created other goals that it either reached or did not reach. Either way it wasn't satisfying. You might have heard the saying, there are two ways of being unhappy. One is not getting what you want, the other is getting what you want. That's when the ego operates, that's the case. So either it achieved already what it wanted and it didn't satisfy it, or it couldn't achieve it and now it's looking for something else that maybe it could achieve. And enlightenment seems a good option, because the Ferrari, that didn't satisfy me, and then I tried the Lamborghini and that didn't satisfy me. And then I tried whatever else, didn't satisfy me. But enlightenment, that's it, I want to go for that. And then of course it wants to know, okay, but what exactly does that mean? I want to know what I'm striving towards, because it might be the wrong thing. Maybe when I achieve it, I won't be there anymore, or maybe the only way to achieve it is for me to dissolve. I don't know if I want it anymore. I think I'm going to ask Eckhart that question. So, what I can tell you, in addition to what I've already said, is enlightenment will not satisfy your ego. Sorry about that. Ego needs to be recognized as an illusion, an ultimate fiction in your mind for something else to emerge. And in that sense, one can say, nobody actually becomes enlightened. You don't become enlightened. But when you get out of the way, there it is. So enlightenment is not something you can actually achieve. And I have no feeling that I achieved anything or that I am enlightened. I said it feels good because just the present moment feels good, that's all I know. So even to make that claim, I am enlightened, is ultimately, cannot be correct. Because who is saying that? Who is making that claim? So, in ultimate terms, you cannot be enlightened. But if you, the person, recognize its ephemeral nature and you no longer seek your sense of self there, then something else is suddenly there that has always been there, but you just didn't know it. It was obscured. It was continuously overlooked. The presence of consciousness was continuously overlooked in every experience. You could have been conscious of it at any moment, but it was overlooked because the hypnotic nature of the sensory world, and especially of the mind, was so overpowering that you overlooked something more essential in you that has always been there, is always there, will always be there. So, and therefore, if the motivation to seek so-called enlightenment comes from that place of seeking some permanent fulfillment, then it's not going to work. And there are spiritual practitioners, without knowing it, they spend years and years looking for that thing, and they're mentally projected into this place called future, which, by the way, only exists as a thought but has no reality as such. There is no future except as a thought in your head. Nobody has seen future, touched it, been there. You can't. It's not there. Life is now, always. There is no future. So if you seek a future state, it's misleading. And if you seek enlightenment in the future, that very search is the obstacle. So however, there can be another motivation for seeking enlightenment, but then I would suggest a different word for it, and not enlightenment, but liberation. And that motivation can be not to find some greater fulfillment, but that motivation can be to become free of suffering. So there can be another motivation for seeking enlightenment, but although I would prefer the term liberation here, or in Christian terminology, a related word that's used in Christian terminology is salvation. So if the suffering in your life gets too much, and then realizing that there is a way beyond suffering and wanting to know more about that, that is a better motivation for finding liberation than seeing what can I get out of it when I finally get enlightened. And of course the answer is the one that's asking that question won't be even there to experience it. So as we sit here, I'd like to put a little question mark into your mind and like you to ask yourself whether at this moment you're thinking. So you will know the answer and try it again. I'll stop speaking for a few seconds and just be alert inside yourself to find out whether you're thinking, because usually you don't even know that you're thinking, you are the thinking. So there's no outside thing that knows that you are thinking, you are just the thinking, you become the thinking, the thinker, and the thinker is the person. And to step out of the person, you have to experience that there is a dimension in you where the person is not, but something deeper is there. That's what we want to explore. So again, a moment of stillness. In the Power of Now, I talk about a cat watching a mouse hole. Now, if you've ever watched a cat watching a mouse hole, then you will have noticed that the cat could spend a long time there being extremely alert and just watching, in the same way that my dog watches a treat when I put it down and say, not yet, and then the dog goes. And so the cat watches the mouse hole, is in a state of complete attention. So one spiritual master, I believe it was a Sufi master, said his teacher had been a cat. When he was asked who had been his spiritual teacher, he said, a cat? How is that? And he said, I watched a cat watching a mouse hole. And by watching a cat watching a mouse hole, I realized I awakened. Because by watching a cat, he entered a state of alert attention in which there's no thinking, like now. Just that. There's no, so that just a short moment, but it's not matter how long. It's a wonderful thing to realize that you can not think. It's a wonderful thing to realize that you are still there when you're not thinking. As Oprah said when we started for the first time with a moment of silence, and then we started to talk again, she said, okay, I'm still here. I just checked in. I'm still alive. I'm still here. I haven't disappeared. One more time. Be alert. You need to be alert to know whether you're thinking or not. So there's an alertness, like a cat, and there may be thinking or there may not be thinking. There may just be the alertness. I also mentioned in the Power of Now that another question you can ask yourself is, what's my next thought going to be? I'm going to just watch out, see what the next thought is that's going to come into my mind. And if you're very alert, it'll be quite a while before the next thought comes. But the moment the degree of alertness decreases, thoughts come flooding back in. Interesting experiments you can do with yourself and your mind. Now, from the point of view of the usual thinking mind, the realization that there is a dimension in you where thinking either does not happen at all or becomes unimportant, to the thinking mind, that is either a threat or completely uninteresting. Because what could be less interesting than not thinking? So from the point of view of the thinking mind, the state of consciousness in which there is no thinking is either a threat, oh, I don't want to go there, I'm going to disappear. But of course Oprah didn't disappear after the stillness. I'm still there, I'm still alive. And then when she said that, I said, perhaps you're even more alive now. And that is pointing to something. There is an intensification of aliveness when you begin to enter that, let's call it, dimension in yourself. The dimension in which compulsive thinking doesn't operate anymore. But you have to be careful because you could easily, what we're doing here is we rise above thinking. We become so alert that thinking either doesn't happen or is seen as unimportant. From there you can easily suddenly drop through thinking to below thought. In other words, you go towards sleep. So when you stop thinking, there's the alertness. Here's the thinking level. That's the normal level for most human beings while they are awake, and even when they dream, they're still going on. Here's the thinking level. Underneath the thinking level, there's consciousness. Above the thinking level, there's consciousness. And even within thinking, there's consciousness. Thinking is an expression of consciousness. But there are infinite varieties of manifestations or expressions of consciousness. This flower is an expression of consciousness taking on the form, this beautiful form, incredible beauty. Consciousness being born into forms. And consciousness, not all consciousness is form. There is a dimension of consciousness that is formless, out of which all forms come, the ground of all being. And that's what we are exploring here. Thinking. You rise above thinking, or you fall below thinking.
Why is this process taking so long for me? I've been listening for years, and I feel what you say, but sometimes I just lapse into my old self. The answer I know is that I lose the present moment. But can you elaborate? Why is this process taking so long for me?
If you consider that humanity has been in this particular state of consciousness for thousands of years, it's not very long. If you can actually go through the awakening process in one lifetime, it's quite amazing. It's an acceleration of the awakening process, going through it in one lifetime. You are shedding, so to speak, thousands of years of collective conditioning, thousands of years. It's an amazing thing that a human being can, and in the past, it's always been very, very few isolated individuals. Not all of them we know of. We know only of some of them who have kind of created a teaching or spoken about, written about it. But it's now happening on a somewhat larger scale. Still, of course, a minority of humans who are engaged in the awakening process. And that's miraculous. There's a gravitational pull still there of the egoic consciousness, both in its personal and collective aspect. And this gravitational pull is quite heavy. It will attempt to pull you back. It'll create all kinds of, it'll use situations and everything to pull you. There's no need to regard it as an enemy, but just to realize that the habitual pull of the egoic consciousness of identification with thought is very, very strong, and of the ego, the ego, personal ego and collective ego. The ego is always identification with form. Consciousness, which is who or what you essentially are, identifies with form. And then it becomes ego. And ego can take on many different forms. It can take on more subtle and refined forms than in a most basic form. An ego it wants power over others. It wants to be admired. It wants possessions. It wants to be more special than somebody else. And if you cannot be more special in your power and your victorious pursuits, and then at least perhaps you can be more special in your victimhood. That's another big ego too. If you can be the victim of others, and then it's a mind-created identity, very powerful. The collective ego is even more creative, more insane than the personal ego. The collective ego, once you identify with the collective, has perpetrated unspeakable acts of violence and dreadful things in this world through warfare and internal mass murder and holocausts and dreadful things in many countries. So this awakening process is actually quite miraculous. And it's futile to ask yourself, how much longer before I'm completely awake? Oh, that's not a helpful question at all. Or even the question, am I going to be completely awake in this lifetime? That's not a helpful question either. The only helpful question is, am I awake at this moment? Am I identified with thinking, or am I able to think without being identified with the movement of thought? Or am I even able to not think when I don't want to think? That's an amazing ability. Am I able to not stop, but allow thinking to subside, be just so present that the next thought doesn't come? And you may find that that can get interrupted by the thought that says, oh, look, I'm so present that the next thought is not coming. But then you can go back to being present again. It's just, so don't ask yourself useless questions that are actually represent an obstacle on your journey of awakening. Ask yourself the only helpful question, this moment. What is my state of consciousness at this moment? And if it's unpleasant, if you are having anxious thoughts and you can't let go of anxious thoughts, in other words, you are in the grip of anxious thoughts, then if there's a little bit of awareness, then you can know that you're in the grip of anxious thought. Not everybody who is in the grip of anxious thought knows that they are in the grip of anxious thought. They are so much identified with the anxious thought that they are filled with anxiety. There's not even a little bit of space that says, oh, look, I'm so identified with anxious thoughts. They are completely possessed by the anxious thought. In other words, the incarnation of consciousness into the thought form is 100%. No awareness left. In other words, consciousness is completely consumed by every thought form. Thought gobbles up your consciousness and becomes thought, continuous incarnation and reincarnation. But if there is a little bit of awareness, then you can suddenly realize, oh, this is what's happening. And that awareness gives you a space of freedom. Because from that awareness, you can say, is this what I want? It's futile, isn't it? That realization arises out of awareness. And then you can choose to direct your attention somewhere else instead of following up every thought where it wants to take you. You take your attention into your body or to your breathing and then into the body. And then you can notice the pull of thoughts, the gravity. It wants you to reincarnate again into another. You can feel it's pulling you. But you don't exert willpower. You cannot exert willpower against thought. You can only be present so that thought cannot fill your space. When you're present enough, you're holding thought at bay. Interesting. You're so present that it outshines thought. Like the sun of awareness, outshining thought. And that's an amazing thing. You discover that possibility. And once you that, and then progress is speeded up very quickly. And you no longer ask yourself, when is it going to happen? Because it's happening now. And you don't ask yourself, why is it taking so long? Because it's not taking long, it's happening now. And then the question is, yes, but will I be able to sustain it? I know it's now, but okay, it's gone already because you asked that question. You don't need to ask, will I be able to sustain? Now, direct your attention, take responsibility for your state of consciousness in the present moment. That's enough. So while you're here, if you have little things that take you out of your comfort zone, for example, the chairs are quite close together. So you may find this isn't so comfortable. I came in this afternoon and I tried the chairs. And I sat next to someone. I just wanted to see what it feels like. And it could take you just a little bit out of your comfort zone. And you could say, I wish I had more space, but you don't. And here you can start with little things like that. That's just what is in the present moment. If your mind comments on it and says, this isn't how it should be, then you can see that ultimately is what takes you out of the comfort zone. It's not the fact that there is not that much room on the left and your right, that the ultimate comfort zone is the physical. There's a physical element to it, yes, but there is a larger element to it that is mental, that is the mind. So in many, many situations, when you're taken out of your comfort zone, the physical element there may be some where the physical is very strong, but in many other situations, the physical element where something that's actually happening is not the main thing that takes you out of the comfort zone. It's the mind, the mental commentary about what's going on, that really brings about this state of frustration, of anger, of resentment, of complaining, of wanting to argue. And if you cannot tell the difference between what it is that causes your frustration and your unhappiness, is it the situation? And I've often said it, but I'm not the first person to say it. I believe the first person was probably the little-known philosopher Epictetus, who lived like 2,000 years ago. And he was the first to literally point out, look at when you're unhappy, are you unhappy because of what's going on? Or are you unhappy because of what your mind is telling you about what's going on? And that is such a fundamental truth that even nowadays, millions on the planet have no idea of that, how powerful that realization could be to transform your life. This one realization that a large part of your happiness, the greater part of your happiness, is not caused by situations around you, or conditions, or even people. The greater part of your unhappiness is caused by a mental commentary about situations or other people or conditions that you find yourself in. such a fundamental truth about the origin of unhappiness, such a fundamental truth. Nobody teaches that at schools. That would be the most important thing for anybody to learn, and such a simple thing, because anybody can verify it in their own experience immediately. The moment they become upset, the moment you become unhappy, says, that's to do with my reaction, and my reaction is what my mind is commenting. What is it? And the confusion of mistaking your mental commentary for reality is a very serious mental illness. So you cannot say that here's the situation and here's what I'm saying about the situation. And then once you have a mental commentary, you experience emotions that reflect what your mind is saying. And then once this happens and you realize, then you realize as the Buddha said, I teach suffering and the end of suffering, which means I show you how suffering arises and I show you how suffering can come to an end. He's talking about psychological suffering, which is a huge part, the greater part of human suffering. Really, all suffering is psychological. That is just pain, physical discomfort. That, of course, exists. Unhappiness is mind-made. So the little thing once you realize that, and this is something perhaps that you could tell your relatives or family members or friends who are not open to anything so-called spiritual, at some point you might be able to mention something when they get upset. You have to be careful with how you choose the right moment, or you better to tell them what you realize. Don't tell them you should do this or you should do that. Give them a little story about what happened to you when you were getting upset about something and what you suddenly realized. And when you dropped your mental commentary about the situation was actually okay as it was. So little stories can sometimes be better than telling a person that they should change something that they are doing. And of course that implies something very deep. Once you realize this truth, it implies that gradually you relinquish unnecessary commentaries as you go through your daily life. Gradually, you let go of adding unnecessary mental commentaries to what's going on around you. And suddenly there's a total shift in how you experience life. Without the, as I sometimes call it, without the excess baggage of ultimately dysfunctional mental commentaries that make the life of millions of people on the planet miserable. I know that pain exists on a physical level, but there's a huge amount of suffering in humans everywhere, in all cultures. It does not have to be like that. So the implications are vast. At first you recognize, yes, it's just a mental commentary as you're standing in the line-up at the supermarket and you got irritated, and then you notice irritation is a form of unhappiness, a minor form of unhappiness. Why am I unhappy? I'm unhappy because I don't want to be standing here and waiting for so long. I'm unhappy because these people are so inefficient and they haven't been trained properly. That's why I'm unhappy. I'm unhappy because I don't want to be doing my shopping after a day's work. Why should I have to do that? That's why I'm unhappy. I'm unhappy because there's not enough time now for me to get home and do the cooking. There's not enough. I'm unhappy because I'd rather be somewhere else, relaxing than standing here in this awful place, surrounded by these dreadful people. That's why I'm unhappy. It all sounds so plausible. And yet you have mixed up mental stuff with the simplicity of a situation of standing somewhere in the vertical position and looking around and breathing. What is wrong with this moment? I'm standing here, I'm breathing, and I'm looking around at the people and the things and the stuff. It's full of good things that you can buy. You don't have to go out hunting and stuff like that. I'm looking at all this magnificence of stuff. What's wrong with? And I'm standing here and, okay, I wish I could stand here for a little longer. You're no longer confusing mental stuff with the actual situation. And when you realize life then flows with much greater ease when you relinquish these unnecessary and absurd commentaries, that also means the amount of thinking that you do as you go through your daily life diminishes somewhat, because a lot of the overthinking that people do is of the complaining negative kind, where they have negative commentaries about things that are happening in their lives. That contributes an enormous amount to the overthinking that people do. Overthinking means an excessive amount of thinking that fulfills no purpose except to strengthen a false sense of self by strengthening the illusion of separation between yourself and the rest of the world, between yourself and others, but otherwise fulfills no useful purpose except to strengthen your ego and to make you more unhappy. And by making you more unhappy, strengthening your ego. Because the greatest egos are unhappy. The more unhappy you are, the bigger the ego. Happy egos find it difficult to survive. So the happiness in the presence of the ego, in the presence of happiness, feels threatened. And the ego, therefore, cannot tolerate happiness for very long. And if the ego is put in the unfortunate position where everything is so nice around for a little while, that what possible cause could I have to be unhappy in this situation? It will come up with some mental stuff. It will project another situation that's going to happen, that's going to make me unhappy. Or it will project an end to this situation. It might project even just a story in your mind where you're arguing with somebody. And so it will always find the unhappiness that it needs to survive.